It looked like nothing more than an afternoon coffee. Three friends, reconnecting in an upscale cafe, the air cool and sterile under designer lighting. Laughter echoed off the marble. Ice clinked in glasses. People came and went, distracted by their phones and shopping bags. But somewhere, sitting at a small table near the corner, a woman was about to die. Her name was Wei Myrna Salan. She was 27. And what she didn't know was that her coffee had already been poured. By the time she took her first sip, it was already too late. Her body buckled forward, violently convulsing. Foam gathered at her lips. Her eyes rolled back into her skull. Diners screamed. Chairs scraped back. Someone called for help. But help didn't come fast enough. Because there was nothing they could do. A toxicologist would later say the amount of cyanide in her system was enough to kill a grown man almost instantly. There was no second chance. No time to react. Just one sip, and the world fell away. And across the table, Jessica Wongso sat in silence. No scream. No panic. No rush to her friend's aid. She just watched. The question that's haunted two nations ever since is this: was that the reaction of a woman in shock, or of someone who knew what was coming? That coffee date, on January 6, 2016, set off one of the most infamous murder investigations in modern Indonesian history. And Jessica, a former student from Sydney, became the face of it all, dubbed the iced coffee killer by a media circus hungry for blood. But from the very beginning, something didn't feel right. Jessica arrived at the cafe 90 minutes before the meeting. Jakarta's notorious traffic gave her a convenient excuse: road rules restricted cars with fewer than 3 passengers during peak hours. She said she left early to avoid the chaos. What she did next raised eyebrows. She disappeared for nearly 40 minutes, reappearing with 3 shopping bags. Each one contained only a single bar of soap. No explanation. No receipt. Just soap. Then she sat down at a small table, carefully chosen, tucked in a quiet corner, partially obscured by a leafy potted plant that, by sheer coincidence, blocked the nearest CCTV camera's view of the drinks. She pulled out her phone, browsed the menu, and, without waiting for her friends, ordered drinks for all 3. Myrna had specifically told her not to. Just hours before, in a group chat, she asked Jessica not to pre-order anything. They'd choose once they arrived. Jessica ignored her. She ordered Myrna an iced Vietnamese coffee. She even made sure it was on the table before Myrna walked through the door. To the casual observer, it might have seemed thoughtful, considerate. But in a case like this, timing is everything. The coffee was there before the victim. And the poison? It had a very short shelf life. By 5 p.m., Myrna arrived. She smiled, greeted Jessica, sat down, took a sip, and within moments, her body began to shut down. CCTV footage later showed her collapsing sideways in her chair. One arm flailing weakly. Her legs stiffening. Patrons looked on in horror as foam began bubbling from her mouth. And in the middle of it all, Jessica remained strangely composed. She claimed she was confused, shocked. But witnesses would later say she didn't cry. She didn't touch Myrna. She didn't even get up until someone told her to move away. In the background, the cafe staff scrambled for answers. No one suspected poison, at first. It just didn't make sense. But when Myrna was pronounced dead less than an hour later, police returned to that table. That glass. That single drink. What they found changed everything. Forensic tests detected cyanide in the coffee. A massive dose, up to 70 milligrams. Enough to kill twice over. And the only person near that drink before Myrna arrived was Jessica. The media exploded. Indonesia was captivated, glued to their TVs as the details spilled out. Jessica, common designer clothes, became a national fixation. Every movement, every glance, every twitch of her mouth was broadcast and analyzed. Primetime news shows covered nothing else. In interviews, Jessica said she and Myrna had been close. That they'd studied together in Sydney. That she'd flown to Jakarta hoping to mend their friendship. But investigators quickly found cracks in that narrative. Jessica hadn't reached out to Myrna in over a year. In fact, their last conversation had been heated. Myrna didn't approve of Jessica's behavior, her drinking, her erratic relationships. At one point, Myrna had told her to seek psychiatric help. It wasn't a reunion. It was unfinished business. Back in Australia, Jessica had a troubling history. Her ex-boyfriend had taken out multiple restraining orders against her. She was hospitalized several times for mental health issues. She had even once sent disturbing messages to friends, threatening suicide. By the time she left for Indonesia, she'd been fired from her job at the New South Wales ambulance service. She was unraveling. But that's not the image she presented at trial. For weeks, she sat poised in the courtroom, denying everything. No, she didn't poison the drink. No, she didn't tamper with the glass. No, she didn't lie about their friendship. The CCTV footage? Misinterpreted. The timing? Coincidence. Her calm demeanor? Just shock. And there was no physical evidence tying her to the poison. No fingerprints on the glass. No bottle, no residue, no witness who saw her pour anything. Just timing. Circumstance. Behavior. That was enough to convict her. Jessica was sentenced to 20 years in prison. She served 8. And now, she's out. But the story didn't end there. In her first interview after release, Jessica looked the camera dead in the eye and said, "I didn't kill her." And when asked if she knew who did, "I can't say that," she replied. "I'm not allowed to." The air around her was calm, even casual. But her words, they left a chill in the room. Because if Jessica didn't do it, then someone else was in that cafe. Someone else prepared that coffee. Someone else watched a young woman die, and walked away. The mystery still haunts Jakarta. And the questions haven't gone away. Because someone poisoned that drink. And someone, whether they meant to or not, got away with murder. When Jessica Wongso walked free in October 2023, the courtroom was silent. No crowds. No reporters shouting questions. Just the soft sound of footsteps on polished tile as she stepped out of the detention center, 8 years older, but with the same cold stare she had when the trial began. She didn't smile. Didn't cry. Just walked. Indonesia watched in stunned silence. Because while some believed justice had finally run its course, others were left unsettled. Too much still didn't add up. Too many loose threads. Too many unanswered questions. How did she get the cyanide? Where did she hide it? Why wasn't a single trace ever found in her belongings, her car, her hands? If this was premeditated, carefully executed murder, where was the evidence? It wasn't just the public asking. Legal experts, toxicologists, even a handful of retired police officers began speaking out, quietly at first, then louder. One by one, they pointed to a troubling truth. The case had been built not on science, but on suspicion. Forensic testing, they said, had been rushed. The autopsy was inconclusive. The glass itself, the alleged murder weapon, was discarded by cafe staff before investigators could secure it. By the time police examined the scene, the drink had already been dumped, the evidence diluted. Nothing was preserved properly. Chain of custody? Broken. And the cyanide? It vanished. Samples taken from Myrna's stomach during the autopsy were mysteriously lost. Toxicology tests conflicted. One lab said there was cyanide. Another couldn't confirm it. A third claimed the levels were too high to have come from a drink at all. Was it possible that cyanide was never in the glass to begin with? That maybe it was introduced another way? Some even began to whisper the unthinkable. That Myrna might not have been murdered at all. But that's where the contradictions begin. Because anyone who saw her final moments, anyone who watched her body collapse, saw the foam at her mouth, the horror on the faces around her, knew something violent, something unnatural had occurred. People don't just die like that. Not without help. So the theory evolved. Maybe it wasn't Jessica. Maybe someone else slipped something into that drink. Maybe another friend. Maybe a stranger. Maybe someone who walked in, unnoticed, during that critical window of time. Or, maybe it wasn't personal at all. Maybe it was something bigger. A few weeks after Myrna's death, an anonymous tip was submitted online. The message was vague, cryptic, even, but it claimed that Jessica had been used. That the murder was a distraction. A test. A kind of warning, sent by people with far more power than anyone suspected. Police dismissed it as internet nonsense. But the paranoia had already begun to spread. Myrna's father, Eddie Darmolen Salian, wasn't interested in conspiracy theories. He wanted answers. He stood by the investigators. He believed Jessica was guilty. And for nearly a decade, he became the loudest voice in the room, appearing on talk shows, news panels, in front of cameras, holding up courtroom photos of his daughter's lifeless body. But even he admitted, he still didn't know why she was killed. What could have pushed Jessica that far? That's when people started digging into their past. Back to their time in Sydney. Back to a time before things fell apart. What they found wasn't a friendship, it was a fracture. Jessica and Myrna weren't as close as the media made them out to be. Sure, they studied together. Sure, they hung out. But there was distance. Rumors. Some even claimed Jessica had become obsessed with Myrna's life, her beauty, her relationship, her wealth. That she resented her. Envied her. That beneath the smiles and photos, there was something bitter simmering just under the surface. One report claimed Jessica once begged Myrna not to marry her boyfriend, Arif. That she became cold and withdrawn when Myrna announced her engagement. That she spiraled afterward, falling back into drinking, lashing out at friends, skipping work. Another former classmate said Jessica had a dark side, polite in public, vindictive in private. If she felt betrayed, she didn't forget it. By the time she flew to Jakarta, she hadn't seen Myrna in over a year. And yet she insisted on that coffee date. Insisted on the cafe. Insisted on ordering the drinks. And when questioned later, she couldn't remember where she sat. Couldn't recall what she did with her bags. Couldn't explain why she giggled to herself moments after Myrna's collapse, caught on camera. All she said was, she didn't do it. And now, she walks free. Unapologetic. Smiling in interviews. Her life back, piece by piece. But Myrna's family? They're still frozen in that moment. That cafe. That iced coffee. That convulsion. That silence. Because in the end, no one else was ever charged. No other suspect. No new trial. No fresh evidence. Just a haunting possibility that someone out there, maybe Jessica, maybe not, slipped something into a glass and watched a woman die in front of a dozen people, and walked away. And if that's true, if there really was a killer sitting in that cafe, calm and composed, sipping their own drink as a young woman took her final breath, then the real story might not be about what happened in that moment. It's about what came before. What was said. What was threatened. What was promised, and what was broken. Because somewhere in that past is a secret. And someone is still holding on to it. Jessica Wongso stayed quiet for years. No interviews. No confessions. No explanations. But in 2023, everything changed. When her sentence ended, cameras waited, but not the kind she once feared. Not news vans or paparazzi. These were documentary crews. Podcasters. Producers with streaming deals. Everyone wanted her story. Her version. Her side. And finally, she spoke. In a carefully edited special, streamed around the world, Jessica Wongso sat in a dark room, backlit, eyes glassy but unwavering. Her voice was calm, deliberate. Like someone who had rehearsed every syllable. "I didn't kill Myrna," she said. "But they needed someone to blame. And I was convenient." She talked about the media frenzy. About the trial that played out like a soap opera. About being turned into a monster before the evidence was even tested. "They decided I was guilty," she said, "before I ever opened my mouth." But not everyone believed her. Not after seeing the footage. Not after hearing how she'd laughed at the hospital. Or how her stories changed. Or how she never, not once, expressed real grief for her dead friend. And then came the part no one expected. When asked if she ever thought about who did kill Myrna, her smile froze. A pause. Then just 2 words. "You'll see." The internet exploded. What did she mean? Was it a threat? A warning? Or something else entirely? Was she hinting at a conspiracy? A cover-up? Or maybe, just maybe, a second act? People weren't so convinced. They said Jessica wasn't hiding a killer. She was the killer. Not just that Myrna died so suddenly, so violently, with no one ever seeing the hand that did it. But that the one person who might know the truth, may never tell it. Jessica vanished from the public eye again, her image retreating into shadows. But Myrna's family never left the spotlight. Her father still speaks. Her mother still mourns. And the question still lingers, bitter as cyanide. Was justice ever truly served? Or did the real killer get away with murder